My name is Clark, and I was injured 35 years ago in a diving accident in a river. My level of injury is C5-6. After going to rehab at the UW, which I was in for 6 months, then I came out, went to college. Went to college for 6 years, graduated here from the UW. In rehab back in the day, you were always pushed, and it was kind of the end goal was you're going back to work or you're going to go to school and find something, change your career and do something. And there was all the support then and there to do that. So I was very fortunate to, at that time, to be injured, if there's a fortunate time to be injured. So I did that and went to college, was always somebody who wanted to succeed. So you know, it just wasn't something I wasn't going to do. I was going to get a job and I was going to be successful. So I tried and kept doing it, and I had that. And then I got the opportunity and I just continued on with it. So that opportunity was there, and I think today sometimes that opportunity isn't there for folks. We move them through rehab fast. We don't give them the tools sometimes. You don't get 6-month rehab stays anymore. You're lucky sometimes to get 6 weeks. So it's brutal that way. I think just being able to know that if I needed something that had to do with SCI, I could come back to the system here at the UW. I spent probably 6 or 7 years where I didn't come here at all. I literally got tired of being a number and part of that system. It was so big, but I didn't need it then either. But when something would come up that I felt was more spinal cord related than just a regular GP, then I would come back here. So tried to work that system as best I could. And it's been like that ever since that first rotator cuff in '95, in which I had another one in 2002, and I've had a couple of fractures of my leg through the years, and I've always found the right people here at the UW when I needed that kind of thing. I think that, number one, it's having a physiatrist who knows me, but also knows SCI more than anything. I now am employed in the mobility industry. So I'm an ATP for a company that services a lot of chairs here at the UW. Hey, how are you doing? Good. Well, hey, this will be fun. It's an assistive technology professional. It's a certification that you get that allows you to service folks who have various different insurances. You can't work with a patient who has Medicare if you're not an ATP. I also got another credential called SMS, which is Seating Mobility Specialist, which is another certification that just kind of focuses in on my specific specialty. So, and I've been doing that since 1988. I think first and foremost that my employers have always recognized what I bring to the table as a person in a chair is instant credibility, and they have always accepted what my limitations are. So the big deal is that I can't schlep equipment around. I can't bring a chair up. I can't bring cushions and backs and different things that I need to do good job of what my work is. And so I will ask and have a technician all the time. And so they bring the equipment up, they do those things for me. I have someone in the office who typically does most of my order entry and paperwork. There's a lot that they can't do because they don't know the products. So there's still a lot of that order entry that I do, but all the basic insurance information, all that stuff is done for me. I have never seen it as a detriment to what I do. It's always been a positive. You know, I work for a for-profit company, so they look at the numbers. My numbers are always good, so they don't worry about that. So as long as the numbers are good, you're good. issues that a person with my disability goes through makes it more difficult to work, period. You have to have great support. You have to have the drive. And early on, you need to be able to know that you're going to be able to do it. So those are really big encompassing things. And when I say those things, let's start with just good support, because I think it starts there to know that I'm going to be able to work. So early on, I had great support to go to college. I lived with my dad. I used services that were available to me, having attendance, then weaning myself off of them so I became more independent, so that I felt good about what I was doing, and I knew I needed to in order to do those things. I'm married, have 2 kids. One just graduated from college and one is a senior in high school. My wife gives me great support. She helps me in the morning with what I do need on some personal care. I get off to work, I drive myself. Again, even at work I have support, so getting my equipment around and doing things, they understand that. So you're never going to be able to really work if you don't have some sort of a network that allows you to do it. I'd been asked to play rugby for a couple of years and just too busy with work. And then I was in between jobs, and I had a little bit of time, and then the new job wasn't as demanding for a while, and that got me started playing. And it was a great outlet. I mean, for 2 reasons. It gave me a group of guys that you're just gym rats with. You know, you burp, fart, cuss, get angry with each other, and you do what people do on the gym floor. I mean, that's what you do. It was very much active, and it was designed, quad rugby's designed so a quad can play on a quasi-level playing field, because it's played on a basketball court. So you're able to push. If you do things outside, that little bump or crevice doesn't look like much, but it is to a quad. So when you're on a basketball court, it works great. I got as much, and I was very active. I played high school football and baseball, and I was in construction. So I mean, before my injury, I was very physical in what I did. So to find an outlet that made sense for me, that I wasn't at a complete disadvantage, even though I was the weakest player on the team because of the way they grade rugby teams, they still had a place for me, and it was an important place. So, and then the second half of it was just having that group of guys you are with 2 or 3 times a week, you're traveling with, you're doing stuff that you don't do around the family. At the time it was first just my wife, and then my daughter came around, son and daughter, so then there's 2. In fact, I stopped playing after 8 years when my daughter was born. My wife finally said, you know, there's 2 kids now, you need to be home more. I dealt with everything that an able-bodied person did with their child, but just had to do it from a chair, which wasn't always as easy, but you know, making sure they got someplace, making sure that, you know, they got their grades, their homework was done, giving them the resources to go to college, giving them, who knows what the resources are, if they're going to be the bounce back into the house, preparing for that, and then trying to prepare that maybe when we pass away, there's something for them too. So you deal with all the same things that an able-bodied parent does. I know that I'll always have that support with my kids coming back when I need that, because I think they've always recognized that, you know, obviously from day one, Dad's different than all the other dads out there. So they know that down the road, and it hasn't really been talked about, but they know that Mama may need some help with Dad, or we're gonna have to plan for that, and it's in our mind too. My wife and I have talked about our aging together, and how with her being primary caregiver with what I do need, which is enough that there could be a time where she couldn't do it. Yeah, so we've set away funds in that direction so I can hire somebody, because, you know, how that will happen, we don't know. Is it a live-in? Is it not? What am I needing? You know, probably like most people out there, I'll do the same thing as most people, and we will want our privacy to the bitter end. And so maybe not do it as soon as we should or could. Who knows? Maybe we'll be smarter because we're both in healthcare. My wife's an RN, so that helps as well. That we have ideas of what's going on in our bodies. So we'll see. In my opinion, now as I'm getting older with SCI, is something that someone should do every year, because they need to kind of get that whole team perspective of what's going on. And even today, I think sometimes the patient will come in and say, oh yeah, everything's fine with my chair, everything's fine at home, I'm doing everything, and they don't know, they've got that window with the doctor, and I think the doctor and part of the program should be, we want to schedule with PT. I know you may not want to, want to schedule with OT, and they're going to ask some things that maybe I'm not asking right now, and make sure that things are the way they should be. I like to say everything's perfect, but 2 rotator cuffs and falling out of your chair twice and breaking your leg, obviously things weren't just perfect. If there's probably anything, is to make sure that I would have those follow-up exams early and often. I just think, and this again comes from my own work, that I see people that start having problems with their seating and scoliosis and pelvic obliquities, different things, basically in how they sit in their chair, can happen within a year, maybe 2 years max, and then it can just continue to get worse. So I was very fortunate pretty early on in my life that I got into this industry, and I was focused to make sure that those things didn't happen to me. And I think it's critical now for the team that's seeing them to make sure they're really thinking about those things, because you can't catch those 20 years later. You can't catch them 30 years later, even 10 years. I mean, if you don't catch them, you're not going to get to them. And I think that probably things that I don't know of as well, urological problems, kidney, all those things, need to be followed up on too. I mean, I do get the every year, you know, ultrasound for the kidneys and those things. So I do those things. So I've never had any trouble that way, so I'm fortunate. I think sometimes being a person that was not going to be denied on what I wanted to do, would I have taken care of my shoulders a little better? Could I have seen somebody and said, hey, look at my transfers in out of the band seat? Would that have been, could you tell me how to do this better? I mean, I have 2 impaired shoulders and probably transfer better today than I did before, in a lot of ways, because I had to do it right. So that would be probably one of the biggest things. And it was also one of the most detrimental things to my independence, because I did lose bed mobility after my first shoulder surgery, second one especially. But, and I thought I wasn't going to be able to drive from a regular car seat again. And I do, from a van seat. I can transfer in and out again. I went through 18 months of hell driving from my chair, in my opinion. I'm glad people can do it, but when you're used to being in a comfortable seat, and then you're trying to drive from your chair and you don't have the stability and balance, it was pretty nerve-wracking. Transferring 16 times in and out of my van seat in a day is probably not the best thing to do. So I had to go back to work too and tell them I can't do that kind of stuff anymore. I need to get more focused on where I work. And again, I had an employer who was open to that. And so that worked for me. Because now I'm probably only getting in and out of my van seat on a difficult day, and I don't mean difficult in a bad way, but 7, 8 transfers, where oftentimes it's probably only 3 or 4. Much more manageable for the shoulders. I think that the biggest challenge for me with retirement, and I think with all of us with SCI, who are, especially if you're working and doing things, is to still stay active. If I work 8 to 12 hours a day, and that's just my working day, and then it doesn't include the time to get ready before I even go in, it doesn't leave much time for that. You have to really carve out and make time. I did that for several years playing rugby, which was great, but it was a lot of work. Originally I wanted to retire. I just knew the body was going to wear out like at 55 and be done. Well, reality hits that you got 2 kids you got to put through college, and you're not going to get done and do that. But I'm still looking at a goal of like 60. And truly, for me and my wife have talked about this, it's like the body's going to wear out for activities that I want to do and can continue to do. Perhaps, again, if I can get a good exercise, stretching program, things like that, maybe they won't. You know, I think it's hugely important to have a group of people that you can talk with. Way back when I first got injured, there was a big group of us that got together once a month because a mom started a group here in Seattle called Spinal Cord Society, which was a group to try to find a cure for spinal cord injury. And we did a big auction every year, but we met every month, and there was always anywhere from 6 to 12 of those individuals, and they could rotate some through there. And you always had time to share stuff and you were talking, things come up, and you wouldn't talk to them with anyone else. And that was just as good for the parents, the spouses, and the caregivers who were there too. They would talk about those things too. It's kind of like what you have now with the spinal cord injury forums, except this was more of a close-knit group because we really got to know each other, and yet this cause was huge. Rugby was the same thing. You talked about all sorts of stuff, you know, everything from bowel programs to caffeine, you know, how you get into bed, out of bed, all those things. And when you travel, then all of a sudden you're sitting there helping somebody, and vice versa. We hate aging. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but as a GIMP, you don't know what the aging really means and how it's going to affect you. You got to deal with all the regular aging things of, you know, I've got to go, as my dad would say, go see the seeing eye guy with the colonoscopy. I got to go, you know, I got to go and find out, you know, what my heart's doing. Is that in good shape? You know, how do they test that? You know, they don't really know how to test it. They don't have treadmills for guys in chairs, not at a regular cardio office. So there's all those things, but more than that is you just start feeling a little weaker. Myself, you put on some weight, all of a sudden transfers aren't as good. All those kinds of things are like doubled. You know, a weight gain for a person in a chair doubles the limitations, I think. Who knows how much it really affects them. Maybe it's triple, quadruple, 10%, I don't know. But those kinds of things. So when I talk to those guys, and we do talk about it now, it's kind of like, you know, the 40s and now the 50s, you really start like talking about it. And it really doesn't matter, I don't think. I've got this long group of people that I've known for 30 years, but I also have friends that I've come to know through work that I've known for 5 or 10 years. And if they're in the same age bracket as I am, you're just like, you know, this sucks and we got to really take care of ourselves. And that's more of it than anything, is taking care of yourself. You don't ignore that some of your equipment's getting bad. You get it fixed because it just makes life harder. You know, you can't move, you can't, if the chair's not working right. You make sure that you're closer on a transfer. You don't take that chance of, or had a conversation the other day with a friend, you sure you don't want caster locks on the chair like you used to have? I really don't use them that much. Do you sometimes? Yeah, well then we better get them. You know, it's stuff like that that I go, you can't take chances, because you don't, the bones get brittle, the history says, and statistics, so you have a fall, it can just get worse. We used to just get right back up. It doesn't always happen. So we talk about it. I do have both a power and a manual chair. And up until even a year ago, my manual chair was my primary chair. I didn't start using the power chair until my first rotator cuff in '95. So that's 15 years after I was injured. And that was really a macho thing. I didn't want to. I mean, talk about taking some heat at the rugby gym. You come in your power chair. So it's like, that was brutal, but it opened up so many doors for me with my family. I was able to get on the ball fields, the soccer fields, go to the parks with my kids. I mean, it was huge for me to get over that hump. I mean, my wife was the first to say, why didn't you do this years ago? You know? So there was, you know, there was that to get over. But this new incident is that I got a new van, and I can't push up the ramp, even though it's a kneeling van. As a C5, 6 quad, I can't push up the ramp in my manual chair. So I've been using the power chair. I mean, I still work. I work every day. So now I only get in my manual chair on the weekends, where before I would only get into the power chair on the weekends. So things definitely changed, and it was for that reason on that particular one. I've thought about it, like, is that helping my shoulders? Is it better for them? I think there's a plus minus. It's like, I don't know. I think my chair's optimally set up as it should be. I do this for work. But when they're optimally set up, then they're probably not going to do you damage for propelling your chair. People can always have problems pushing their chair. I mean, transferring out of their chair if they don't do it right. But when you're propelling your chair, you should be able to get in a good ergonomic position to do so. So what I'm worried about now is I'm losing some of my mobility in my shoulders because I'm not doing it as much. I know I've lost strength, or definitely have lost strength by not doing it as much. So I'm working on that, trying to figure out a way to get back to where I can use my chair, manual chair, as much as I used to. And so, but it's been a transition, a big one. And it's one that I haven't liked, and yet it's also made life easier in a lot of ways too. Will I stop and go do a few extra things because I'm in my power chair instead of my manual, where before I wouldn't have? Absolutely. An extra stop at the store or going somewhere else that afternoon, and yeah, so that, it was a trade-off, but I don't know which one's the winner yet. I'm over being macho. Yeah, now it's just like, you're 53, dude. It's like, you need to just take care of yourself. I think the advice I would give to somebody, whether they're newly injured or have been injured for, 5, 10 years, it doesn't matter, is that one is make sure you're active. Keep your brain active. Don't stay stowed up in your house. I would say go to your doctor. Use the resources that a place such as UWMC has with, not starting just right with your doctor and all the therapy services, and then the extra services like the Spinal Cord Injury Forum, so that you can get around other people. That's where you'll talk. And I know some people who, they absolutely don't want to associate with other people in chairs. People I've met. And some I've known for 30 years still don't want to. And then there's others that that's all they want to do. And they're just, I think you've got to have both. I mean, most of everybody out there isn't, so you better, you know. But I think that they need to use those resources and be aware of their body. I think the number one thing is, for me, and it comes again from my work, is how you sit in your chair is going to dictate how functional you probably will be long term. Because if you start developing a scoliosis, you start developing a huge kyphosis, all of a sudden you don't breathe as well as you used to, you don't transfer as well, you got a fixed deformity versus one that's flexible. Go see the right people that can help you get out of those problems. So, and it would go the same if I was thinking about it. I've been really fortunate. I mean, literally on one hand, I can tell you how many UTIs I've had. I mean, super fortunate. But, you know, make sure you're getting those checkups, the kidneys and everything, because I've seen way more urostomies and colostomies starting to happen, you know, and a lot of them are aging folks, and so I know there's studies, people out there trying to figure out, okay, why are these happening? And I will say also that when I talk to these younger folks, I say, you know, my era is the guinea pigs of this, because the docs, the therapists, everyone you talk to, they don't know exactly how we're going to age either. I mean, I'm kind of like towards the top end of this, but not that I don't know some people 40 and 50 years out, but not very many because they didn't live this long. So now it's like, take care of all the things you can, and then what you can't, I mean, nobody can. Aging with spinal cord injury, and if you're not, I mean, we have all these things that we've kind of talked about that you need to be aware of, but you have all the other things too. And I think there was a transition time, and it probably has just been in my 50s, where I've really started to think more about the heart, diabetes, all the things that are just chronic out in society for able-bodied folks, that we have to be as aware, if not more, by how we treat our body. And because again, healing of skin wounds, all these kinds of things, that's nutrition based. So there's a lot of other reasons why you have to be. So we have to take care of that aspect of our life just like an able-bodied person does, because again, you don't know how much it'll affect in a different way for us. And that's really been the last, like, again, it's probably since I've been 50 that I've started to think even more about that kind of thing.